stratification by complexity of plants also. You know, did the angiosperms make it to the top of the Grand Canyon because they could run faster than the mosses? Let's take a look here at questions relating to religion and philosophy, our last one here. You say, isn't evolutionary theory actually nothing more than a religious belief of scientists? Alright, we got moaning on that one from this group, okay? And you, right now, you're like, oh, I want to answer that one, okay? That's because of the belief systems you folks have. You've thought about this. But when this comes to teachers, comes to politicians, they're usually completely befuddled by this one. Because if I asked you to define science right now, would we even come up with the same idea? Theology, religion, and sometimes, which for this group, you think this is a no-brainer. For a lot of people, it's difficult. What's the difference between science and therefore evolution and a religious standpoint? Because they'll say, well, we have our God, you have Darwin, okay? We have our disciples, you have geneticists, okay? You know, we have our Bible, you have the origin of species. I mean, they get these parallels. So, well, how do I respond to that? Here's how. Science is guided by natural law, right? We seek to explain our environment based upon events happening in nature as explained by natural law, laws of physics, laws of geology, laws of chemistry, laws of mathematics. We are encumbered by having to explain what we observe in nature with what we know to be natural law. Whereas intelligent design or religion is guided by what? Supernatural intervention, the trump card. Sorry about that. So there's a big difference right there, and this is very important. You say, well, isn't evolution just a religion? We can stop with this bullet point right here and put that cat to bed, but we can go on. Science explains what is observed with reference to natural laws, laws of physics, chemistry, geology. Intelligent design religion explains what is observed with reference to what? Supernatural intervention. Polar opposites again. Science is testable against the empirical rule. Testable against the empirical rule. It's testable against the rule. Science is what? Oh, let's do it again. It felt so good. Testable. Okay? Intelligent design religion is rarely testable. You say it's never testable. Well, it is. A little story probably you've heard before. I worked with my colleague who, they called me up one day, but the secretary said, Dr. Forbes, we have a question. How many ribs do humans have? 12. But how about men? You see where we're going? 12. And I said, fine, thank you. And I went over to their office a couple hours later doing something else, and they were still having this fight. Dr. Forbes, she doesn't believe you. And believe me what? That humans have ribs? No, the men have the same number. Because we're talking about the Adamic creation of Eve, right? And I said, you know, you can come over and look at, we literally have skeletons in our closet. You come over and I'll show you. And her response was, it doesn't matter, you put those skeletons together. Okay. But isn't it testable? Wasn't the Adamic creation of Eve and a different number, that rare component would be testable? How about science? Conclusions are tentative, right? Pending what? Information to the contrary. Whereas in religion, conclusions are what? Final. There'll be no discussion. And science has to be potentially falsifiable. Because you can't say it's so if we have no way of testing it. And we have to have the ability to at least potentially show that it's false. But in religion, rarely testable, and therefore what? You're just not falsifiable. You just have to believe. Science asks the question and seeks to find an answer. Drum roll. Religion provides an answer and seeks to find proof. This is what intelligent design is all about, right? Scientific creationism. Let's come to our conclusions and desperately trying to find data to support the conclusions. Cart before the horse. Science is encumbered by having the horse first. Science can't explain many intricate structures and processes found in nature, therefore it doesn't seem reasonable that they're intelligently designed. This always comes from somebody who's never studied human biology. Okay? You say, aren't humans intelligently designed? Really? Would you ever design your body the way it's designed? Wouldn't you rather have the vision of a hawk, the speed of a gazelle, the hearing of a dog? Okay? Would you rather have the ability to move your appendage and joints in all directions? Wouldn't you like to have parents, eyes in the back of your head? Okay, I saw you do that. How about an eye on your finger? Greg, do you have change for $1? Well, let me look. Okay, there's so many different things that you can have. Ask your neighbor. Okay, so you can have. How about an appendage? Your arm, this is amazing, watch this. You can do that, a 360, okay? Try that with your cat. You can only do it once, okay? Wouldn't you like, if you were designing a human from the ground up, wouldn't you make joints 360 all the way around? So when you look at these differences here between science and religion, you look at what we've been talking about here today, questions relating to nature, science, the scientific knowledge, religion, philosophy. You wonder, how is it possible in 2017 that we're denying climate change? How is it possible that we're challenging the age of the earth? How is it possible that we're looking at intelligent design dual treatment laws already starting to manifest themselves across the United States? We've been time-warped back about 10 to 20 years, and I thought that if I were able to retire, that I'd be able to say, I've spent a big chunk of my career, I've done something, I've thrown some water on the fire. Someone was throwing gasoline when I wasn't looking. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Atheists Speak Up. I'm Steve Whitty, I'm your host today. And with us in the studio is Miles Barnett. Miles is an author, and he's written this book, God Explained, and we'll be talking about this in some detail in this episode. So, welcome to Atheists Speak Up, Miles.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here.
It's amazing to me to have written a book, God Explained, and to be on an atheist program. So
that is kind of interesting. Also in the book, you interviewed, there are a number of interviews, you
Absolutely.
Interviewed Michigan atheists on Arlene.
I interviewed Anne Marie, and I enjoyed her so much that I sat in her back porch, and we had coffee and we talked.
Right.
And she was just a lovely, lovely lady. And she looked at me and said, well, I'm going to hand you all of my speeches that I gave around the country. And she went in and she handed me this whole packet of speeches. She said, write what you want. And it was probably one of my hardest things to write because there was so much to use.
So much material.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry to say that Arlene passed away before this book came out. I think she would have enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think she would. I think she would have. Yeah. Right. So I only knew Arlene for a couple of years, and she had a heart attack basically summer before last, almost 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah. The style of the book is that you went out to a religious leader or a leader.
I attempted to, yes.
And you got them to talk about their own faith, or in the case of Arlene, lack of faith.
Well, yes. Actually, I had them write. I wanted them to write how they viewed God. Who is God? And that's why it says God Explained. Leaders from 30 different religions interpret God, because they're doing the interpreting. I'm not doing the interpreting. I wanted to be the compiler. Mm-hmm. That was the goal.
Mm-hmm. So Arlene said things like, we don't hate God, we just don't believe, we deny the existence. We don't believe that God actually exists. So, it's an open question, and for a lot of people, that's typically what agnostic means. The atheist says, no, I just don't believe. But she also went on and said, what we are interested in are things like, in politics, the separation of state and church. She always had state and church rather than church and state, because everybody else says church and state. So just like to spice it up a little bit. Freedom of religion and freedom from religion are things that she thinks that are interesting.
Wherever I've spoken, I've always bring up the atheists.
Right.
And it's fascinating to me when I get the reactions. And when I say their belief is very simple. You could have whatever you want. You could have any religion you want as long as you don't thrust it upon them. Allow them to believe
Sure.
the way they wish
Sure.
to believe.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you look historically, that's why it was set up. I mean,
Yeah.
it was reading religious texts in school. That was the basis of the lawsuit that set this whole thing up.
Right. So from my perspective, Arlene talked about morality a little bit, but these things are, to me, they're really quite interesting. The atheist simply means that it's somebody who doesn't believe in a God. Morality can come from a number of different places, and
Absolutely.
Arlene talked about sort of basic morality, not killing people and that sort of thing, and then cultural morality,
Right.
which she said that atheists ignore. I take a different view. There is a wonderful set of moral views and rules that the humanists have put together, and secular humanists have put together. And we had a secular humanist on a few months ago. And this is you look at it and you go, oh, I agree with all of this stuff, and it's pretty easy to pick up. But you don't have to do any of this. You can choose your own path. You don't have to say, oh, I believe that science is the way to truth. You can say, well, I'll believe whatever truth I believe. And you might have become atheist because you're skeptical, and that might push you in a science sort of direction, but it doesn't have to. So there actually is, it's actually kind of funny. There really isn't an ism here. There just is what there isn't.
But the reason I put atheist in the book is because, to me, it is a form of religion. You have a group of people who get together who all believe the same way.
And that is true. And there are groups that are not just support groups, but there are groups that talk about the issues that they have.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that you find out is that there are conservative atheists and liberal atheists, so they don't necessarily believe everything all the way up and down the line. And that discussion actually, I think, is easier with the atheists because they know not to be dogmatic about everything. And I think these discussions then become easier.
The atheists, to me, probably know more about religion than anyone else.
Well, that was certainly true with the Pew Research. They had a couple of, they're almost quizzes, but they called them surveys. Right. And they would have like 15 or 20 questions. And they would, there were a couple that were on religion. And 90% of the questions were about Christianity. Then when they had like 1,500 people in one of them, and the atheists and the Jews were the most knowledgeable, and the Christians were last. I found it very strange. I actually have a Christian background myself, and I would have thought that everybody had the education I did, and that's apparently not true.
No, it's been a unique experience doing this book.
I'm sure it was. It had certainly never been done.
No, and that was part of my way I got people to go with the book. I was thrown out of a number of wonderful, wonderful, wonderful religious institutions. And I had people who say, I'm going to go along with you. This is great. As they grabbed my arm and they escorted me out, yes. And it was, after a while, it became funny to me because I got thrown out of so many. I couldn't take it serious anymore. I understood that once somebody said they would do it, until they said no, I kept going back. So my 90-day project, that was the goal of this book. I was going to do it in 90 days.
Yeah.
Turned out to be 4 years. And I got to know a lot of the people in the book very well. I mean, I went to whatever religious institution it was, and I spent a year going there, maybe 2 years going there, and getting to know everything about that institution. That was not brought out in the book. I have one section where I talked about how I met people, but I didn't go into the depth of what it took to get them to to write.
Yeah, so you make an introduction to each of the religious statements. So how did that go? There was some research there?
There was a lot of research there. As a matter of fact, that was, to me, the hardest part of the book. Because how do you take atheism, as you said, there's different ways of looking at it. or any other religion, which also has different ways of looking at it, and put it into a paragraph.
Right. It is tough. Yeah.
Yeah, my editor wanted me to do that, and I must have rewritten those paragraphs 100 times.
Yeah, I bet.
And I finally said, I'm going to do the best I could do, and that's what's going to happen. So I
Yeah.
started with that, and then the next part, I wrote down how I got to the person. And then the next part, for the majority of it, I have what they wrote. Now, Arlene gave me all her speeches, and that was hard to put together. I had other people who gave me sermons. One gave me a liturgy. One gave me a letter, which I found very interesting. A couple I had to interview, and I always got their okay before it went into the book because I used their name.
Right.
If I used their name, they're responsible for this section, even though I put it together.
Right.
I felt that I compiled it. It wasn't my opinions,
Right.
except for the very end where I tried to explain who is God, are really kind of left out of that book. I try to be
Right.
very neutral within the whole book.
So the various people they had, some of the essays or writings are short and some are longer, right?
Absolutely.
So there was an editing issue there, I'm sure.
Well, I made the promise when I talked to everyone that I would put in their writing as is.
Okay, so if
And
it
I
was
didn't
long,
give-
it was long.
If it was long, it was long.
Okay.
There was only a couple that I had to change only because of the way they were presented. One, I took out a sentence because it was inappropriate.
Okay.
One, I let go too long. And if you read the book, if people read the book, they're going to see there's one section that's very long.
Right.
And I probably should have cut that down in half, but I had promised the person that I would put it in as is.
Right. As it turns out, I have some experience with that religion, and that is the way that their texts go. It really does give you the flavor of it. I read quite a bit. I read an entire book of it, and it reads like that. It really does. So it almost has to be long. I don't know any way to do it, any way around it.
Well, I ran into that same thing with other people who quoted, instead of the question was, who is God, according to their point of view. And some people quoted text only, which I found fascinating. They quoted the Old Testament, the New Testament, or whatever religious
Right.
text they had, which didn't answer the question, but this is how they viewed it. So therefore it was put in.
Yeah.
I didn't think I had a choice. It was my promise. I made a promise, so therefore I did it.
Yeah, there is a tendency if you're in a profession, and you can think of a pastor or a rabbi as a professional, whatever religion
Yes.
that is, right? A professional Christian, a professional Jew, I guess. But there is a tendency in any profession. So, like you're an auto mechanic, you get a vocabulary that comes with being an auto mechanic,
Right.
pistons and rods and various other things. And you get to the point where you understand your profession with the vocabulary of the profession. And it can be hard to bring it to an everyday vocabulary. It can be.
Well, there was another side to that, which I didn't expect to have happen, and that's the political side, where some of the people had to write a certain way because religion is a business.
Oh, yeah.
I could
Yeah.
cut and dry it every other way, but in order to keep their job, they have to have people, as compared to radicals who blow themselves up. I mean, if everyone
sure.
blew themselves up, guess what? Whoever the religious leader is out of business.
I suppose,
It's
yeah.
very, very simple.
Yeah.
That's why the radicals do it, not
Yeah.
the general population does it. But some of the people really showed it as a business, and they wrote as a business. Others wrote from the heart.
Right.
Others gave a lot of text, and they tried to stay the center ground. The one who gave me full reign was Arlene with the Atheists. She just,
Right.
go for it, any way you want
Yeah.
to do it. And that was fun. I mean, I read a lot of her, obviously I read all of her work, and it was very hard to pick out the areas that I thought were the best, because there was so much. So I grabbed from one and I grabbed from another, and it was like shuffling cards, and I shuffled them together, and that's what I came out with. In researching the atheists, I found them to be, the group of atheists, to be very interesting. As a matter of fact, you had invited me to
speak at one of our meetings.
speak at one of your meetings.
Yeah. So
and,
we have monthly meetings. They're just at a restaurant, and we try to have, for the last year or so, we've tried to have a speaker come in. We just had one, in fact, yesterday.
Oh.
And for the second time, we had a speaker who was from the group. And he had researched a prominent atheist who was a musician, and he talked about it. And it was fun. It was a fun talk. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here, was we're trying to have a little education, but we're trying to have fun.
I had a ball with
Yeah.
your group. I mean, I probably had the most fun. I just let loose. I was me.
It was great.
And as compared to, I've given sermons, which was interesting because I've never given a sermon before. I've spoken in front of helping organizations. I've been on the radio, and each one is different.
Sure, sure. To some extent, I actually have given a few sermons myself, and to some extent, giving a sermon, it's a one-way communication. And I have another TV show, which is astronomy, and it's one-way communication. You and I talking, that's different.
Right.
But I have some one-on-one with the camera, and it really does feel like I'm giving a sermon.
Well, I had a rabbi
Sometimes.
say to me after I handed out the book, after it was published, I went back to everybody and gave them a book, who said to me, "You will only hear from the people who are unhappy, who are in the book. If they're happy, you won't hear a word."
that could be true.
And it was true. I mean, it was kind of fun to go through. It was, and the people who said, "Well, you missed this," or "I didn't mean it that way,"
Yeah.
were the people who were unhappy. People who were happy, I didn't hear one word.
Yeah, one of the rabbis who did an essay, I guess, had a couple jokes in it. I thought it was hilarious when I read it. One of the ones was about business, and he says, "There are 3 rules in business," and you can just about imagine he does it with a straight face. "There are 3 rules of business. The first is never tell them everything that you know," and that's the whole joke, right? 2 more rules? No, not everything.
Remember that the sermons that they gave in here, the writings,
Yeah.
is many times the way they speak. And you have to keep your audience's attention.
Sure. Yeah.
So they have to throw in something that's
Yeah.
gets people.
Wake them up again.
Yes.
Yeah. There are several formulas for sermons. There's the one that I hate the most is tell them what you're going to tell them, tell it to them, and then tell them what you told them. And I rather have a story arc and get to some destination, and then maybe wrap up. But it's not retelling it. It's just some summary.
Yeah, I brought up to you when I gave a sermon, and I've never given a sermon before. And the most fun I had was after I spoke about the book, because the sermon was basically about the book. I threw it open for questions. And again, I always bring up the atheists wherever I'm at, because
Right.
I like to get the people's reaction, because they picture atheists totally different than the way it actually is.
And that's
They
why
don't
we
have
have
enough
this show.
understanding. Yes.
Yeah, we try to get the word out.
It was fascinating to me, and I'm always asked a question about atheists and atheism, and I say the same thing. I feel like a broken record.
Right.
The atheists believe you could believe in whatever you wish to believe. Just allow them to believe the way they wish to believe. And it's a very simple way of looking at things, and obviously it's more complex.
Right. Well, the atheist is also trying to live a life. And it's important because they don't believe that there's another one, right?
Correct.
This is it, so.
And watching, and again, and listening to people with the prejudicial statements. If there was an atheist and I dealt with a religious person, the person would always bring up, well, they're an atheist. They don't believe in God. However, my God, again, they kind, fair, loving, and forgiving, which
Right.
doesn't make sense to me. Okay.
All right. So I think we're just about out of time.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it was great having you on the show. It's always fun talking to you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And please, if you have a chance, please, for the audience, please read the book God Explained. Leaders from 30 different religions interpret God. My name is Miles Barnett.
So Barnett with 2 T's on the end?
Barnett, Miles, just like the road.
So this isn't kilometers in Europe. It's,
No,
it's miles
it's
all
always
over the
miles.
world.
That's correct.
So, cool. Cool.
And, fairly easy to get to, and hopefully I will get people to read it and begin to talk to others
Sure.
in a different manner. The goal is to stop prejudice. It's a very simple goal.
That's a great goal. So we're just about out of time. This is Miles' book, God Explained. I want to thank our guest, Miles.
Thank you.
Thanks for, it's great having you on the show. Thanks to all of our viewers for watching. Atheists Speak Up.